So I'm going to come around on this side. I'll tap this tree 2 times. Okay, and that's good. I see a little liquid, which is a good sign.
Pouring maple syrup generously onto pancakes, it's easy to take for granted just how much time and energy, attention and care went into making that sweet forest treat. Can you picture it? A snowy sugar bush in Canada or Vermont might come to mind, but in this episode of the Agroforestry Podcast, we'll get to know a different side of maple sugaring. The smaller, slower, but no less culturally rich and delicious syrup made in Missouri, in the lower Midwest. I'm your host, Hannah Hemmelgarn. First, let's take a trip to the University of Missouri's Basket Forest, one of the Ag Experiment Stations in the College of Agriculture, Food, and Natural Resources, or CAFNR. Ben Knapp hosted us here during their annual open house tapping day. Dr. Knapp is an associate professor at MU who focuses on silviculture and restoration ecology. He's also the incoming interim director of the Center for Agroforestry and faculty manager at Basket Forest.
So I'm Ben Knapp, and I'm a faculty member in natural resources with a focus in forestry, and I teach courses in silviculture and fire and various things. I'm also the faculty manager of this property, so this is one of the CAFNR farms and centers, part of the AES network, used for teaching research across different programs in CAFNR. This particular site, if folks have not been out here before, this is the Basket Wildlife Research Center, and it's a little bit over 2,000 acres, so it's a pretty big property, and most of it is forest. And so it's kind of unique from other farms and centers in that a lot of the emphasis is on the natural resources, wildlife, forestry. There's a lake on the property, so there's also some water quality and hydrology and fisheries. So sort of different areas. It's nice and close to campus, so we can come out for labs and do things like this. So a lot of really cool kind of utility. We've been doing syrup here for about 10 years, and I've been running it or leading it the last 5 years or so. It's been a fun project to get people out to learn about the process, to get a bottle of syrup, to make some syrup that we can kind of use to promote the site, put a little money back into the project and whatnot. All right, so let's we'll step in this pavilion and just quickly go through the process of going from sap to syrup, and then we also have some syrup for tasting if people are interested in that. So we'll do that fairly quickly so we can get moving and start tapping trees. Sound good? Awesome. All right, so we call this the sugar shack, and this is where we do the boiling. Okay, so we'll get going with the trees, but then we got to get the sap back here, and that's when we really start processing and turning things into something sweeter and something good. So we've kind of set things up just so we can see the steps today. Right now we don't have sap to boil, so we can't do that process quite yet. So a few people have done this before. Anybody know what the percent sugar is when you get sap out of a tree? Approximately how much sugar? 3%. That's a great answer, 3%. It's going to range from 2 to 5, somewhere around there. So for sugar maples and then other maple species we could use like red maple and silver maple, they usually have a little bit less sugar in the sap, so sugar maple's more efficient, but it's around 3% sugar. So anybody know what syrup, the final product, what sugar content that's going to be? 25. Way higher. 67. Yeah, shooting for 67% sugar in the final product. So that is a lot of boiling. We don't add anything to it. It's just driving water out and concentrating what's already there. Okay, so it's maple product where you just take sap and drive water out. So to go from that around 2 to 5, say 3% sugar to that 67% sugar, it's a 40-to-1 volume ratio in terms of the products, which means we need 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. And so that is quite a bit of a difference. Okay, so a lot of what we do in the process is we sit around and essentially watch water boil, and that's how you make syrup. But the way we do it, we've got this boiler, which is basically sort of a large hobby-sized boiler. So industry, what they're doing in Vermont and Canada is going to be an entire room that's a boiler. This is like you're making this for fun, sort of for your family. There's a lot of interest right now in farmers market and for agroforestry, extra products coming off of properties, and this kind of boiler can produce quite a bit, with that kind of approach. But what we do, we get the sap from the woods, and then we get it up in this big tank that we've got up on this structure we built. And then we have the sap itself goes through this series of PVC to enter into the boiler. And so once we get the sap up there, we don't have to fill this up with sap ever. So gravity just feeds it. And we've got on the side here a little mechanism that when this gets full, the sap floats this little stop valve up. And so it'll stop filling up the boiler. And so at that point, it's just going to boil off, and gradually that float valve will go down, open it back up, and it'll just trickle in. So this is almost a continuous trickle of sap that's matching the rate at which it's evaporating off. This is a large firebox. This back part has these metal fins that go down, so it heats incredibly efficiently. And this will reach just this rolling boil. And it can foam over, it can splash out. I mean, it's a pretty intense boil process. So you're getting really efficient boiling going on back here. The connection from this part to this front pan is on the far side at this elbow. And so as it boils, you'll get movement of the sap to this front portion. But keep in mind, we always have diluted sap, 3% coming in back here. So this part, after you boil all day, you get this gradient, where this part is a much lower sugar content, and it starts to get more concentrated up in this front part. And so we'll be boiling. We can boil in a single day 200 to 300 gallons of sap, and so that's going to reduce that volume. But we won't actually make the finished product in this portion. So we'll boil here till about 40% sugar or so. And then we usually, because our operation is sort of day by day, we'll let this cool off, draw the sap off of it, and then we'll continue with another boil that's more controlled. And so on the other side of the table over there, there's a metal tank, and it's much smaller. And we hook that up to propane, and then we call it the finishing boil, where we take that 40 or 50% product and take it up to 67, and then we can shut off the propane immediately when it gets there, so it essentially stops very quickly. With this wood fire and the heat of this metal, you can't turn it on and off. And so we could really risk burning the sap or going over 67 or something like that. So we do most of the work, the kind of brunt work here, and then the finesse, the finish in that other boiler, so we can get it right where we want it. Okay. Then we have a filtering process where we basically run the hot product through a couple different filters. So one, we've got on this table this wool cone. And so we insert these smaller paper cones within these wool cones. And then that's going to bring out any sediment and any particles that's in that product. And so it creates a really clear finished product. When you boil, when you bring sap to a certain temperature, it creates a precipitate that's going to happen every time, and they call it sugar sand. And so you have to filter that out, or it's going to end up in your syrup. And so it's a really important process, the filtering, to get that really clear, beautiful end product. And so we'll take it from the filtering and then bottle it right after that. So we bottle it when it's hot. So part of that process is going to help sterilize those bottles, so we keep anything from growing in there. We're at that level of sugar content, and we have that level of heat. It's going to sterilize the inside and keep that clean, and it keeps for a really long time.
People have been harvesting tree sap for thousands of years, and there are multiple ways to go about it, from cutting directly into the tree's sapwood to connecting tubing to the taps in tiny holes in that wood that can be drawn out by a vacuum extractor or gravity fed into large sap holding tanks or totes. The method used at Basket, with taps or spiles connected to bags and buckets on each tree, is suitable for the scale of collection done here. It does require some extra time and labor, but it's a good way for the folks at Basket to measure how much sap each tree is producing as they haul it out at each collection time.
Okay, so we're going to get tapping. I'm going to show everybody what we're doing. We've got two different methods that we use to collect the sap, and one is the bag like you see here, and the other is just the white buckets, which we have stacked over there. We've already put some of the bags out, and so most of what we have left are the buckets, but we do have a little bit of both. The bags that you see already out here are trees that we are going to take measurements on, and so some of that data collection I was talking about, those are ones we're going to track a little bit more closely to see how much sap that each tree is producing, the sugar content each time we collect and things like that. The rest of the trees out here, we just collect sort of as efficiently as we can, so we don't take the time to do the extra stuff. We've got two main sugar maple stands. They each have about 100 trees in them, and so we usually tap around 200 total. And I think most of the other stand is already tapped, and so we've got that going. So once we figure out the tree we want, the tapping is basically we're just drilling into the tree and creating a spot where we can get the sap out. Question was what height? It's really whatever height's comfortable. And so usually, we're going to do it at chest height where we're holding the drill. But you can do it a little bit lower if you wanted for some reason to go up, but there's really no reason to do that. So it's really what's comfortable. But there are a couple things we look at before we tap into the tree just to make sure we won't have problems. One would be any kind of wound wood, like stuff like this. This tree's had some big wound. There's dead tissue here, and so that's not going to be something we're interested in. And then this wound wood kind of curls over, and so there could be some dead wood essentially involved with that too inside. So you wouldn't want to tap right on this. You could go to the opposite side of the tree and tap and be just fine. Okay, so look for something that's a blemish or some kind of wound or issue. It looks like an old branch, so I wouldn't tap right on that either because the tissue is going to be different in there. The other thing you're going to want to look for is any old tap holes or wounds. And so since we've tapped these year by year, we're going to see those. You'll see them a lot. And so it's going to be, a small hole. The tree will have covered that up or be in the process of that. So you're going to see within that this little circle that has sort of this wound wood that's curling together in that circle. You'll see it for sure. You don't want to tap right on that because that's also going to be a little bit different with the tissue. So typically we'd want to offset from that a couple inches to the sides or above and below. Okay, so you can go where you have an old one, you can go down 4 inches and tap, but you don't want to be right on it. Okay, so otherwise you just find the spot that kind of works for you. When you drill in, you want to go in at a slight upward angle. Okay, and that's just going to help with the flow. So if you go in this kind of angle, then the sap's got to work against that, and if you don't have a good seal, it's more likely to run down the trunk of the tree. You don't want to do something super sloped, things will just fall off. Okay, so just give it a real slight, upward angle, and then that works just fine. So we've got two different setups. All right, so the bag system, it's really nice. We're going more and more to this system. The bag collects the sap. We use a metal spile with the bag system. So we've got two types of spiles, metal and plastic. The metal's for the bags, okay? And then this frame is gonna allow the bag, hold the bag securely and allow it to rest on that spile. Okay, I'm gonna come around to this second tree here and drill in. Okay, so you wanna get far enough in that tissue that you're getting the sap that's available. 1.5 inches is about the ballpark, 1.5 to 2 inches. Okay, and that's good. I see a little liquid, which is a good sign. We've got rubber mallets. So you've got 2 ends of this. You know, the fully round end is what goes into the tree, and then the kind of half circle open end is what you're collecting from. So I'm gonna put this into the hole, and when I tap it with the mallet, you can kind of hear it when it really seals. So it'll kind of be a hollow, and then it'll be more of a thud sound. Okay, so I don't know if you could hear that, but it was sort of more of a snap at first and then more of a thud. And that's really when it seals into the wood. You want to get that so that the sap doesn't, again, come out and run down the front, but instead it comes through. And then you're just going to hang this part of the frame over that shark fin. Done. Okay, super quick, really easy. We typically have an idea about production because of weather. So to get sap flow, you need to have freezing temperatures followed by a thaw, something above freezing. And so either you can get that with the day-night fluctuation. So at night it gets down in the teens and in the day it gets up to 40. That can be a really good recipe for getting production. Or you could have like a really hard freeze and come out of that. And so we typically have an idea that we're gonna have some sap coming. And then we'll watch them every day because we don't know for sure if it's going to be a whole lot or just a little bit or what. So we do keep track of it, but if it's below freezing for a week, you know, we know we're not going to get anything. So I'm going to come around on this side. I'll tap this tree 2 times. Okay. Should get the same kind of sound with this. Okay, so it was like that snap and then it went to that more of a thud. And then I'm gonna put this blue tubing on the end of that part of the spile, and that's gonna direct the sap into the bucket better. And then I'm just gonna hang it right on the edge and kind of use the tree so it rests against it and it's not at some weird angle. And then that holds on really well. Super windy days, sometimes you lose some, but otherwise it does just fine. Any questions on that? Easy.
Research and education are the central objectives for the Basket Sugar Bush, where Ben Knapp hosts this open house each year. And because education overrides production goals, they don't finish tapping trees until students are back on campus in late January. In Missouri, the sugaring season can start a bit earlier than that, but even with an earlier tapping date, the sap flow season in the lower Midwest is quite a bit shorter than it is farther north, where there's a longer winter to spring transition. For sugaring, that's when temperatures hover just below and above freezing between day and night. This may seem trivial, but sap production hinges on this delicate seasonal shift. And when the weather changes suddenly, which has become more common with global climate change, that can have a major effect on a land steward's estimation of annual sap and syrup yields. To learn more about how sugar makers in this region are dealing with this conundrum, I visited with Beth and Daryl Morgan at Heartbeat Farm in Eolia, Missouri, to hear about how they got started and what keeps them going.
We farm here with my daughter Nikki Morgan and her wife Katie Hostedler. Name of our farm is Heartbeat Farm, and it is spelled Hartbeet to represent heart, the Old English sort of derivative of a mature male deer, which represents a healthy forest or nature. beet representing the cultivars that we do grow here also. So it's important that what we do is also part of what nature is here to do as well. We had the property long before we started doing anything with maple. And Nikki, our daughter, gifted us, particularly Daryl, like 10 tree buckets, spiles, the kit basically to get started on 10 trees. And so we did it, just the two of us, cooked it on a propane burner outside the back door. And as you know, it takes a long time to get a very small amount of syrup. But, we were really psyched about it, and we did get enough really delicious syrup for us. So it was perfect. And once we started the farm here, we thought it would just be so great to share that and be able to, sell that syrup with our vegetables. So we expanded it quite a lot. At this point, I think we do about 110 trees a year. Yeah. And we'll show you the sapinator, which is what we now cook it on, not propane. Propane is expensive and it would take you a long time to cook it. We cook over literally an inferno. It's a very hot flame that cooks it down, and then there's like 4 pans. So you start with your cold sap at the back end, and you basically move it by hand. I mean, we're old school here. We don't have like a newfangled store-bought, cooker. So yeah, and we like that because I think it imparts a really very specific flavor to our syrup. It's kind of almost caramely, because it's cooking hard on those corners, and we love it. So we can walk down this way and kind of take a look at some of the trees and how we tap them, and I'll show you the sapinator too.
Awesome. Great.
Well, let's go down here to the other side. So we don't have to go too far, and we don't go deep into the woods. So we have put tags on the trees so they're numbered, which kind of helps us. So if we have a tree that's just not performing really well, we can then kind of take a note of that and then re-tap it, or just pull that tap and tap a different tree if we need to, so that we're not just wasting our time on a tree that's not putting out anything. Usually if a tree is just simply not putting out and everybody else is, then it's either a bad tap, bad placement for the tap, the tap's not in far enough, tap's in too far, or the tree's just dying or something. We try to tap to the south. That seems to be a better way, because the sun's going to hit it early on. It's going to warm it up faster, and you'll get that sap flow. And the sap is going to flow anywhere from 2 weeks to 8 weeks. That's all you get. And that's going to run anywhere for us here. In different places in the country, it's very, very different. But for us here, we tap our trees around the middle to the end of January, and we start seeing flow anytime after that. And we probably collect anywhere from the beginning of February to the middle of March. Usually by the middle of March, we're done. And within that 6 to 8 week period of time, we might get syrup for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or maybe 6 weeks. Like, we don't know. Last year was awful. We just didn't really have that much. It just quit on us early. Keep in mind when we do this, we're pulling a trailer with a big tote that we're putting the sap in, and it's usually cold and either frozen or very muddy. Especially frozen and then thawed and muddy. And so it's a little hilly here, and yes, we've gotten stuck many, many times.
One thing that we have admired about your place is that you've been able to work well with NRCS to work on a forest management plan and really take care of this area, with one of your objectives being for maple sugaring. Can you tell me about that?
Well, so in our forestry management plan, that was one thing that they recommend that you do, is to eliminate the maples to open up a place for the oaks and the hickories, which totally makes sense because maples grow fast and they take over the light from the little oaks and hickories that are slow to grow and pick up the pace. But in our plan, we have sections that maple is sort of allowed and encouraged, whereas other parts of our forest, they would be taken down in places where they're not letting the other hardwoods, oaks and hickories, come in so strongly. So that's really the bigger part of it, is in the agroforestry plan that they were able to do, that's a little bit different from most of the other plans I think that they do. Because they really had to look at that and kind of go backwards on their plan, because they're not used to wanting to save the maples.
The forest management plan they put together with support from a forester at the Natural Resources Conservation Service is a perfect example of how Beth and her family are seeing the forest for more than the trees, including multiple goals for different parts of the land: habitat for bats and the shagbark hickories, timber and wildlife value from the oaks, and sap harvests from the maples. And this is exactly the kind of diversification that makes their sugaring operation possible from an economic resilience standpoint, too. They have vegetables in the warmer growing season and maple syrup in the colder early spring, but it does keep them busy.
People say, what do you do in the off season? Like, there's no off season. We have no off season here. And the only thing about that is that you don't have to jump out of bed in the morning to do it. But, we have to dress up for it. And sometimes you have a lot of clothes on, your coveralls, and it's cold, cold, cold. And, we're walking up these hills and it's icy and snowy. And, before you know it, you're hot. You've got a lot of clothes on, the old gaiter and the whole bit. And a lot of our trees here's the path that the trailer stays on, but the trees are down there. We're all up in here carrying 5-gallon buckets back and forth. So it's a lot of work to move the sap, back to the trailer where we pour it into the big tote and, drag it back. So what it feels like is exhausting. It's a lot. But, some days that's the biggest part of our day is collecting. Keep in mind, though, we might collect every day. We might collect once a week. We're just going to really be very dependent on the weather. Sap starts to deteriorate. It's similar to milk in its ability to store. And we don't have the ability to store it in a refrigerator. So, it's cold outside, so it should be fine usually. But you got those days that are all of a sudden 60 degrees, which happens in February and March all the time. So you can't just keep it. You have to go ahead and cook that down. But 7 days is that's max. That's what you got. That's about what you got with milk. We don't leave it that long. You can do that, but you've got it deteriorating all of those days. So we try to cook it as soon as possible. Usually within a day or two we're cooking.
So it's a lot of hard work, and it's unpredictable, and takes a lot of time and energy. Why do you do it?
I love to do it. I love making syrup.
We love it to see when you're cooking it and you're smelling it cooking. It's just, I don't know. There's just something very magical about. I guess too, if you're a sugar head like I am too, that helps, right? I don't know what it is. I've just fell in love with it from day one. The people that buy our syrup, they are so happy to get it. And, they're so sad when we're out or if they've missed out on it. And, they love the fact that it's very natural. It's Missouri syrup. It's not from, somewhere up in the Northeast. So it's kind of just a cool thing.
This is why I love Missouri maple syrup too. It's a labor of love that's rooted in a culture of close connection with the land in all seasons. And syrup makers in the lower Midwest have to be especially adaptable. Their resilience is in their creativity and their diversification, which means it's almost always done at a smaller scale than what's typical in the North. But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. It just makes it extra special. Collecting sap and turning it into syrup, candy, or sugar can also be educational. We learn how deciduous trees have adapted for winter, and we notice the gradual return of spring. As part of this education in the southern limits of syrup, I'm working with colleagues at the University of Missouri, the University of Illinois, Principia College, and a few producers in this region to help grow our understanding of what's possible here, with support from the USDA Ag Marketing Service ACER program. You can learn more about it in the linked articles provided in the show notes. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Agroforestry Podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Hemmelgarn. Tim Pilcher produces the show from our home studio in Columbia, Missouri, on land stewarded for thousands of years by the Osage and other Siouan tribes, the Quapaw, Ponca, Kaw, and Omaha, and by the Oto Missouria, the Kickapoo, and Peoria. With gratitude for all who care for this land, and for the trees who nourish us with their sweet sap, and for our special guests in this episode, Beth and Daryl Morgan from Heartbeat Farm, and Ben Knapp from the University of Missouri, we wish you wellness and happy tapping.